IP theft. Intellectual property theft is expanding. Disclosing zero days build trust with companies, which is key. Chapter 15. There's a nation-state-driven problem is much more present, much more threatening to our economic viability. The constant day in and day out walking out the back door of every major U.S. company of core intellectual property. Other nations facing that we collect intelligence on them, they collect intelligence on us. China targeting American corporations, stealing our core intellectual property is a great thing that drives the American economy. A nation state is engaged in an effort to undermine our ability to be in a global marketplace. The government knows a lot about zero days that might come up against, and it's only when things get to really help out the government will with its darkest sort of intelligence. That's something that fundamentally has to change. Freeing up that sharing gap and creating that trust between the government and private sector shares that kind of information, and IP theft destroys military operations. Very 13. IP is a significant driver of American economy. 70% of corporations is IP. A huge impact on the economy, not only means the loss of revenue, but a demoralizing effect on the inventor. U.S. companies lose about $250 billion per year through theft. China accounts for 70% of international IP theft. China's cyber espionage poses a major threat to U.S. military operations. Chinese malware is penetrating networks used to control U.S. military drones. Chinese hacking could shut down the electric grid systems that we rely upon on cyber bases are Achilles heels. And this destruction causes great power wars, KM 15. Great power competition is returning. American needs to recognize the central role in maintaining the present level of international order. Must will use its still formidable power and influence to support that order against its challenges. Great power by their very nature seeks roots in the dominant spheres it influence. The U.S. has served as a maintainer of regional balances in Europe and the Middle East, especially faces no threat of invasion. China ensures further security. We need to understand that the behavior affects the world in terms of basic stability. A return to a world spheres that influence is a return to the great power conflicts of history. If the U.S. wants to maintain a benevolent world order, then it must not permit serious influence to serve as pretext for aggression. China can compete economically. Russian authorities and international economic order, but security competition is different. Only the United States has the capacity and geographical advantages to provide the security. There is no stable balance of power in Europe or Asia without the U.S. Without the U.S. willingness to use military power to establish balance of far-flung relations to the world, the system will buckle under the unrestrained military competition of regional powers. And Russian IP theft now, Bennett 15. Russia is trained for cyber attacks against the U.S. to an unprecedented level. Targeting U.S. businesses to pull from intellectual property, they're trying to leverage cyber intrusion and cyber espionage. Over 10,000 Russian intrusions in 2015. Moscow doesn't care about being caught. Moscow has orchestrated targeted digital hits on the U.S. The Russian cyber threat is more severe than they previously assessed. And the government improves its detection capabilities, the Russians will not be deterred. And this theft is crucial to power efforts. Views Alan Hamilton 13. Russia's own espionage is driven by a desire to diversify its economy and reduce its dependence on natural resources. Russia's foreign intelligence service that aims to supporting the process of modernization, creating conditions for development, and IP theft threatens companies, defense technologies, and secrets stolen from U.S. industry and government network could give China and Russian military advantages worth billions. And that causes Russian aggression. And it can shell 15. Hundreds of new Russian aircraft, tanks, and missiles are rolling off the assembly lines. Tens of thousands of troops in the military's readiness for all-out war. Russian military named NATO as the top threat to Russia. The nation's 1 million strong military is beefing up its presence. Russia is opening new military bases in the Arctic. Planning and strategic bombers on regular patrols as far as the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. The military has restored long abandoned airfields with security enhanced by a new military. The Kremlin can be expected to pursue defiant forces in Ukraine and may raise stakes further if the peace process fails. The threat for Putin is whether the massive military buildup will stretch the nation's economic potential beyond the limit. And nuclear escalation, we're already on the brink of nuclear war. Read 15. In waging war, Putin would rely on the first use of tactical nuclear weapons. This crisis is an existential moment for the Western Alliance. The U.S. is rising the military challenge posted by Russian expansion. Carter Obama's nominee to serve as his Secretary of Defense declared his support for providing arms to the Ukrainian military. Putin renewed his threats against the world order. He has dispatched nuclear-capable strategic bombers. He's sent nuclear-capable cruise missiles to the Polish border. He's proclaimed his readiness to use nuclear weapons openly, threatened the Danish shipping with tactical nuclear weapons. Putin is lowered the threshold of using nuclear weapons. Putin's conduct would risk the threat of total war. If one side loses nerves in this disciplined atmosphere, the wind won't survive the coming years. Putin's culture of terror brought us to the brink of nuclear standoff where the risk of miscalculation is large. Putin's aggressive military posturing are returning to estimate nuclear threats. And critical infrastructure. Effective information sharing prevents devastating attacks on critical infrastructure. Bush 15. Many organizations face cyber threats. As soon as an attacker links a vulnerability, every company that uses the product is at risk. Critical infrastructure providers find information sharing their government partners, national intelligence, and law enforcement communities difficult because it raises sensitive and complex issues. The cyber defense of our critical infrastructure simply is not possible without cyber threat information sharing between communities. The information sharing rules would not let the NSA war the contractor about what was to happen. The issue has been elevated by recent cyber attacks on large companies. And 0 days are key. Inadequate cooperation with the electricity and water sectors. Stockton and Goldman 13. 0-day exploits gather sensitive information in cabinet computer systems or inflict widespread physical damage. Or weaponized 0-day exploits targeting the traffic air control systems could send false signals plans. An attack on the grid could leave entire regions in the country for dark and capping the economy and resulting in casualties. Dangerous zero-day exploits are those that target the nation's critical infrastructure sectors. The air traffic control and transportation are considered critical infrastructure. With the chemical communications, emergency services, financial, water, power, and nuclear reactor sectors, private companies operate and monitor critical infrastructure by relying on industrial control systems. Internet connectivity render these systems susceptible to zero-day exploits. Government failed to provide sufficient support to private companies to safeguard the nation's critical infrastructure, and attacks to get the command and control leads to nuclear retaliation till for 12. A cyber attack can take out civilian power grid that is the same grid that supplies the cities and empower every military base in our country. Command and control systems could go down, radar systems to shut down completely. Cyber attacks against the U.S. could be seen as an act of war and be met with full-scale U.S. military response with nuclear weapons, and U.S. water security on the Pandemic 14. Nationwide trend of groundwater declines across the U.S. The rate of depletion has increased since 2000. The competition for water by fracking occurs in dry regions of the U.S. More than half of fracking wells in the U.S. are being drilled in the regions experiencing drought. As drought worsens, groundwater depletion, supplies for people and farming shift, and scarcity can set the table for social unrest. And water supplies are vulnerable to cyber attacks. Page 15. Homeland Security reports have highlighted poor security among the nation's water utilities networks inadequately protected. Firewalls are a staple of industrial cybersecurity programs. They have many inherent flaws. The small standard in these configurations to introduce vulnerabilities. Defective frequently discovered, which can be exploited as vulnerabilities. Bidirectional data flows can be used to launch attacks systems to be protected. The level of risk is unacceptably high. And water insecurity risks global war. Alien 15. Water shortages within 10 years could destabilize and jeopardize the very existence of some countries. They could pose a threat to global security. People tend to do whatever they must to survive. Changes across the new kinds of conflicts. Water scarcity and flooding become major transboundary issues. Managing rivers or droughts pose a threat. The U.S. intelligence agencies consider prospect of water shortage a threat alongside terrorism and WMDs. Access to water plays a significant role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. The world's water supply crisis is a serious one. Plan. The United States federal government should substantially curtail its domestic surveillance of computer software vulnerabilities or exploits known to relevant vendors. And solvency. The plan solves effective information sharing between the government and private sector. A signal of their commitment is key to cooperative cyber defense to overcome legal barriers. Resuming 12. A significant fraction of the policy debate about cybersecurity and public-private partnership revolves around the challenges of effectively sharing security information. Principal barriers to effective public-private partnership and combating cyber threats are limitations to the government's ability to share information. The government is collecting information using sources and methods that are classified, and disclosure of the information risks compromising those. Instant disclosure conflicts with the New York Post 11 standard of enhanced information sharing. Private sector actors want most of their federal partners to provide timely and actual cyber threat and alert information. Private sector actors do not receive the security clearances required to adequately receive and act upon classified threat information. These are problems of one of policy. Are not likely to be ones of law but of commitment. And curtailing 0 days to disarm cyber attacks. Mass Night 14. The NSA buys 0-day exploits and makes the internet weaker as a result of it. You are not going to see the Chinese give up on 0 days just because we do. It is meaningless, and no one expects the Chinese or the Russians or anyone else to give up 0 days. Closing 0 days, like disarming both sides, because it takes the vulnerability out of service. It's not about us giving up weapons, it's about building a better defense for the world, because the NSA isn't willing to do that. And disclosing vulnerabilities amounts to disarms the NSA. These 0 days are key. Kill it all 14. The agency stockpiles knowledge about security holes it discovered can later exploit the vulnerabilities, collect information, or infect target devices with malware. Right there. Open for process.
What part did you cut and where?
The final part, kill it all 14, and after malware.
Ready? First, your Booz and Allen part indicates that Russia is a cause of Russian aggression. How do you solve Russian aggression?
We're solving for Russian aggression because right now the 0 days have vulnerabilities. Well, we're solving for Russian aggression against the U.S. Because it's making it less likely for them to be able to attack the U.S. in the first place.
I understand, but your Booz and Allen says Russia has a sense of grievance. It believes that global economic system is entitled in favor of Western countries at its expense. It indicates that hedge is a cause of Russian aggression. How do you solve for hedge?
Well, by closing the vulnerabilities, the U.S. can regain strength and therefore regain their...
Yeah, exactly. Regain strength. So hedge is a root cause of Russian aggression. How do you solve Russian aggression if you do not solve the hedge?
We're saying that we protect from Russian aggression because the Russians are...
Yeah, but Russia wants to... Russia is aggressive because of hegemony, right? Your Booz and Allen indicates that. How do you solve for United States hegemony? Or if you increase it...
isn't to solve for hegemony, it's to protect against the Russian aggression.
Alright, cool. Now your ISA's Chaminade 15 indicates says buildup reflects Putin's readiness to raise the ante in a showdown with the West. the new Russian military doctrine names NATO as a top threat to Russia, in a response to what the Kremlin says is allowing its expansion into Russia's spheres of interest. Putin has insisted that Russia will not be drawn into arms race with the West. This indicates again Russia does not like hedge. That means that does that mean like you do not have an impact because Russia will still be aggressive post-plan?
Well, we are solving against Russian aggression. We're going to be able to protect ourselves against Russia.
Yes, exactly.
But even if Russia is aggressive post-plan, we've still protected like the cybersecurity of the United States. Like that's what our self-worth is.
Yes, I understand. Like Russia's aggressive because it perceives the United States as being all-powerful. How do you solve for that? You don't?
Because we just don't allow the government to like roam around.
Oh, so
and
you
have freedom
okay, cool.
and security. We're asking for the vulnerabilities to be closed up and for that to occur in that way.
So what's the link between 0 days and water insecurity?
Because the 0 days right now are in multiple companies throughout the U.S., some of the companies being the ones that control the critical infrastructure such as water. So if foreign companies or foreign entities go in and hack into these systems, it can take down the critical infrastructure and the water supply.
How will curtailing 0 days disarm cyber attacks?
Because the 0 days are what create the vulnerability for other countries to go in and cause the cyber attacks and affect the critical infrastructure. So if we get rid of the 0 days and the companies know about them so they can solve the vulnerabilities, then there won't be the chance of cyber attacks because there won't be a
How will disclosing 0 days build trust with companies?
Because
there won't be that constant distrust of the government that there's secret backdoors in their company, in their like devices.
Oh, I'm just thinking about it.
Whereas 5 off, solvency, IP to have critical infrastructure. Is everyone ready? First off, domestic is defined as individuals within the United States or U.S. persons elsewhere non-citizens are excluded. Jackson, 09. We define domestic as efforts by the government to gather information about individuals in the U.S. or U.S. persons. Domestic intelligence will focus on individuals located inside the U.S. and domestic surveillance occurs within national borders. Obvious at all in 14. Domestic surveillance collection data about the activities of an individual by government within national borders and surveillance is the collection of personal details that exclude surveillance in places such as hyper in 14. Surveillance covers a huge range of activities. Surveillance is the focused, systematic, and routine collection of analysis on personal detail purposive and incidental acquisition of data and an outcome of surveillance. Surveillance is about people in violation. The affirmative curtails surveillance of non-U.S. persons brought in voting issues, limits loosening the domestic restriction over the floodgates to country-specific purposes are predictable. Ground absolutely the distinct topic core, tolerance and applies to topicality, collection of data of areas or outside the U.S. territories, extra topical exposed limits and independent voting issue. Next off. Text the President of the United States to reduce domestic surveillance of the computer software vulnerabilities or exploits known to relevant vendors. The counterplan solves the case while preserving executive flexibility. Metzger in 15. Internal supervision for your lawsuits with critical and guarantee administrative adherence to governing local legal requirements. Internal supervision to minimize the risk and enforcing legal constraints will automate managerial control. Internal administrative constraints, delegated powers not wield arbitrary accountability in the form of external and executive branch supervision essential for political and legal accountability. Next off. Gimel closure will pass a PC scale bonus pushing RS 11.6. Obama would do everything he can towards going on disclosure. Obama is expected to put forward a plan. Limited restrictions to transfer detainees to U.S. is now not a question of how much PC the president is willing to spend. And Freedom Act passage changes the politics. Any additional new surveillance limits on nuclear HPC grows 6.5. Don't expect major changes to surveillance in the Congress to pursue modest limits. Many lawmakers will reluctant further change after action. Expect Republican leaders once the Senate and the House to resist. Further calls may be difficult to get reform through Congress. Other activists are less optimistic about more action along. Slot with the gift for U.S. and officials are for low-hanging fruit in 0 days. Plan is not popular with the no work. They can be done to Congress to disclose 0 days Fiddler and 15. The Senate bill to secure net outputs to bring its version of the floor to be leaving the path to legislative necessary reform highly unlikely be. Congress would impose on purchase using disclosure of 0 days. It could require reporting for agencies and inspector generals who are relevant. Congressional committees use 0 days to purchase federal requirements to be coming back credit with all their appropriation. Congressional oversight is likely to be politically difficult to achieve and indefinite. Detention increases terrorism, multiple magnitudes shine in. And 12. Detention would clash with U.S. ideals, human rights violations, backbiting, hamper, prosecution, trial, punishment, alienate communities, add to causes of terrorism by preventing root causes by providing targeting, causes of better individuals trying to terrorism, the NDA hampers, counter-terrorism operation areas, the risk of distancing U.S. from close allies, international community, and XOP. The risk of a successful attack on homeland is high. These exports, domestic surveillance capabilities are absolutely vital to deterrence and domestic disruption at CONE. And 15. Core Al-Qaeda has expanded, growing and strengthening, starting to additional nations that security measures are justified because the probability is low. The larger the risk is the higher the probability makes a change in low. The more security measures justifies terrorists cannot be handled like criminals. The only terrorists are focusing on preventing tests before they occur. Counterterrorism requires time to capture the random cell prism and the collection of Marconi metadata with the disrupted 54. Terrorists also very useful to know that they were previously in contact from the hobbled bin Laden. NSA program for terrorists to limit their communications surveillance programs make a significant contribution to curbing terrorism and sorting. The information structuredness is justified on prudential grounds on legal ones. The courts have been long established that when they're both clear public interest, privacy, intrusion, small administrative searches are legal, and the defense surveillance programs do not follow the Fourth Amendment particular search the contributes to the protection of national security and governmental surveillance critical venture attacks on May 13. The current threat of Al-Qaeda and jihadists one that requires aggressiveness and intelligence collection efforts to move towards will necessarily require collection of U.S. citizens' conversations being constant on trial against the jihadists justified to believe the only thing the government wants to do in order to protect citizens in nuclear terrorism triggers extinction cause the planet rollback into increases surveillance to Georgian and 12. Dirty bombs was successful with terrorists with radioactive source attacks might be more accessible than nuclear. While the dirty bombs was only radioactive contamination, destroying destabilization efforts are the possibility of low trained terrorists, later penetrating nuclear facilities and enterprise. Nuclear device by terrorists poses the maximum risk. The materials can be bought on the black market terrorist gun. Time retaining bomb can be yielded to the bomb drop and approach with the explosion of metropolis can kill thousands and cause economic damage to nuclear terrorists with actual nations. Will delegate 10,000 investing in treaty attack given the anti-Muslim sentiments that generate prioritization that de-escalates the package suited about global stability. Nuclear terrorism can be placed on the list of the threat. Nuclear terrorism rules will lead to radical transformation. Next up. No meaningful check on executive flexibility now. Setting 15. Decision making is being characterized by the secrecy and severance efforts to hold the government accountable. Executive policy with regard to surveillance and severe efforts by Congress to engage in oversight fruitless. The executive refused oversight mechanisms. The executive legality surveillance programs and correctional curtailing domestic surveillance that undermines the sole reduction underpins every facet of central power. Wooded Web and 11. Courts of presidents and nations to foreign executive orders, policy representing the sole reduction of the nation. The president allows the power to speak in the representative of the nation. The ownership of executive lies extensively the sole reduction to define presidential power broadly. The president sole representative of the nation and congressional war authorities and ineffective executive war powers are key to combating linear transnational threats, combating terror, rotates and pro required flexible executive view. And 7. The Vietnam War approved by Congress to provoke divisive politics, military hostilities conducted without congressional support in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. The Congress led the United States with bad wars that congressional authority prevent the U.S. from entering the compass of the national interest, delaying flexibility and lack of serious U.S. and it's confronting the growth of proliferation of rogue nations. Each of these requires preemptive action best undertaken by the president or WMD's law for them to inflict devastation. The United States may have reduced force morally and effect. The executive branch sees flexibility adequately when the executive might be able to engage in more limited precisely use of force. The least interest way to prevent the rogue nations from acquiring WMDs may depend on the secret intelligence and co-production decent way. We're going to use the same critical time or windows of opportunity go on insolvency. Circumventions inevitable always claim safety seriously cause 1AC, Savoy and Ravini 15. The OD and I claim that these records are classified info. When classified for classification, disclosure could reasonably be expected to cause damage to national security in the app. Cancel plan does it mandate the USFG no longer buying 0 days since one is curtailing surveillance not buying something 1AC setter. And 14. The statement doesn't mention vulnerability discovered and consulting view to the government by contract to 0 day brokers or individual researchers and go and IP theft. Government has already made changes towards policy. Jafford concludes that this was key that shop with 20 Jafford 15. I think the government's on its way there. Alexander's made changes. The way the NSA Roger was launching it those days in Wariku is trash. It's only warning for privacy decides to deny hacking to US drones without trying to hack US drones without not stop. Market of privacy, and their Bennett evidence only mentions IP theft tries to not give any warrants for those other than those 13 words in the card. The rest is just the general context of advertisers. The app now solving companies in response to IP theft, which is at 1AC Booze, Allen Hamilton 13. Companies recover fairly quickly while they have threat of IP because damage to the short they would be able to recover companies and quickly developing IP outspace to competitors. In this card does not give specific defense with the check, so only means the evidence, alarms, best approves. Russia cannot afford modernization card. Also includes aggressions that would 1AC Aishanov and 15. But it's unclear whether the Russian can afford modernization drive whether the massive military build will stretch the nation's economic potential beyond the limit. And the 1AC, read evidence so divorced from 1AC, solvency has nothing to do with the 0 days proves that also concludes nuclear war is either a legal or inevitable. The plan cannot solve proves ready and bolded with or without modernization go into critical infrastructure. Concedes status quo sufficient either the mechanisms extra trouble with the plan or the attacks on these companies critical with the grid 1C Bush and 15. Cyber attacks to Sony, JP Morgan, Target, and the Home Depot, and stocking speculative and only an example gives the warrants for the air traffic control they know, understand how air traffic works and all cause beyond 0 days stocking and global like and golden 13. U.S. servers understaffed flags legal authority private companies through implement stronger protection. The Bennett indicates that 1,000 attacks should have triggered your impact either way. The president checks 1C Tolford and 12. Running cyber attack and improving nation the electric gets among those current priorities of the country nuclear once adopted as president.
What exactly are, like, do you have any solvency?
What?
What do you solve for? What is your alt solve for?
Question.
So, do any of your off cases solve for anything?
So yeah, the counterplan solves the app. It indicates that the executive curtailing surveillance is the best way to do so. Well, I don't really get the question if there's more to it.
Why won't curtailing 0 days solve for your TRDA?
So, what's the question?
So if the entire point of 0 days is to decrease the
so
vulnerabilities to solve for terrorism, why aren't we solving for the terrorism?
So we indicate like those forms of 0 days is what's key to stopping terrorism. Like, you can't so if your argument is that less surveillance solves terrorism, then I think you need to develop that a lot more than just what this cross-ex question is.
In the IP, in your Boozian on Hamilton 13 card, you said that the companies can respond to IP theft, but how can they respond if they don't know about how the companies are getting information from them, how they are stealing the intellectual property?
Yeah, your own evidence concedes that companies are very quick at responding to IP theft, i.e. they don't just like mosey around for 6 months and do nothing about it, they respond immediately. So your own evidence indicates that there's no real impact because companies adapt and survive.
But if companies haven't been able to respond to the 0 days from the NSA because they don't know about them, and other foreign entities are going
but
in.
your own card says that companies do innovate and recover.
Alright. What does your alt do?
No, you didn't read.
UCP.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Alright. Why does the president enacting our plan increase?
Make it a difference. Like, why can't vote just happen? Like,
Well,
why can't the president just
well, for one,
because you're just
the
saying that
disad makes it mutually exclusive. Because the president, the sole representative of the nation, beyond that, it becomes a question of who does the curtailing. Both can't happen at the same time.
Right. That's fine. So.
Correct?
yeah. solvency crit, or solvency IP crit, and then I'm gonna go topicality, war power, politics, CP, and terror.
So, solvency.
Solvency, IP, credit, factor. T. War powers. Politics.
Terrorism. War powers, politics, climate change, terrorism.
Okay, so first on solvency, what we're saying on solvency is that the app is the only way that we can enact this plan because of the inherency that exists, because the government is the only one who knows about these 0 days and knows about these vulnerabilities, that the app is necessary in order to promote this this discussion between both the private and public sectors, because the only way that this will happen is through the app, because they're the only ones who know about it. Also, the app curtailing 0 days will disarm the attack, and the plan can only the plan can solve for effective information sharing. Answering circumvention, judiciary participation makes it give circumvention unlikely. 11. Scholars understate judicial role in surveillance law landscape because Congress acts as judicial decision whether to implement the decision or to supplement weak procedural rules that the court prescribes. The judicial decision makes decisions fade into the background. Initial decision determines the strong or weak checks on the executive's use of particular surveillance tactic. If follows that the judicial responses and citizens of executive rule selection represent the most important point of judicial decision for likely to set the path for future legislative action, the fact counsels in favor of courts seeking the fullest possible participation when a new question about executive rule selection arises. Now on to IP theft. All they say is that like it's not likely, but I don't think they actually understand like the thing of our plan. Our thing is saying that like Russia is aggressive and that they will try to implement and attack these vulnerabilities. We're not saying that we're trying to solve for Russian hegemony at all. That's not like the point of our plan tech. The point of our plan tech is to protect the U.S. cybersecurity and that of the private sector within the United States from Russian IP theft. And what we're saying is that the plan is the only way to do this because of inherency, because the status quo won't solve for it, because the government is the only one who knows about this, and the only ones who can facilitate this discussion between the public and private sectors that will lead to this happening. So, yeah, that's important. So extend like the benefit 15 saying that this Russian IP theft is happening now, and that, and of course, allowing solvency, which says that only the government facilitating this conversation can happen. Also, they say that now moving on to critical infrastructure, they say the score is not significant because they do not exist, but as I said before, like the inherency of this happening is the fact that like nobody knows about it, and that the SCO can't solve at all because of all this. Also, they only mention water security, but we say that there's a lot of difference to a lot of different critical infrastructures, but most prominently our Tilford 12 and BIMIC 14 card both says that like lack of water security that could happen because of these vulnerabilities is deadly, so extend that as well. On top of that, they say that domestic as individuals, though domestic surveillance occurs within national borders, we need because we also occur within national individual property or like personal ideas. It's surveilling them and the ideas that they have within within companies and stuff like that. So I don't see how we don't meet. And now on to war power CK. Case outweighs each other. Disad Russian aggression from IP theft leading to nuclear wars is the biggest impact in this round, and extinction prohibits the ability for the K to even occur. Timeframe votes after we are already on the brink of nuclear war from Putin's arsenal, and the weakened alliance, the one I see read 15 card, no link, extended circumstances allows emergency presidential action. The Fourth Amendment law justifies immediate warrantless surveillance. Probable cause is unnecessary when the special needs beyond the normal need for law enforcement make the probable cause requirement impractical. In genuine emergency, the president can take immediate action to protect national security, even if the action violates restrictions. Surveillance incident circumstances in the special needs context of national security will cause ordinary Fourth Amendment requirements and impact inevitable. Mass surveillance leads to intelligence failures to dismantle terrorist operations. Eddington, Data Policy Analyst, 2015. Surveillance programs after 9/11 were premised on the belief that hijackers were able to pull off the attacks because of the failure to collect enough data. Yet, congressional joint inquiry 2002 and the 9/11 Commission found exactly the opposite. The data detected plots were in the U.S. government's hands prior to the attacks, and the failures were ones of sharing analysis and dissemination. Quest to collect all only leads to the accumulation of masses of useful information, making it harder to find real threats. Mass surveillance is not only destructive to our liberties, but it is continuing to use the virtual game to achieve more lethal intelligence failures. And only the plan makes alliances durable, key to solve the fourth gen threat. Moss. 2008. Increased presidential power, use of military force reinforces the tendency to make more independent decisions than challenge international. The U.S. practice of strong executive prerogative may cause it to disagree repeatedly. That is more difficult to obtain their commitment to joint operations, and Congress is determined to restore the balance of congressional control over use of failure to do so would further divide the U.S. from international allies. Congress will reject assertive presidential claims and reestablish a better balance of the process in which the U.S. decides to go forth, and unchecked executive power risk miscalculation. Public definition, Adler. 11. Executive primacy ignores executive flaws and frailties. Champions of executive power ignore separation of powers. Unchecked executive practices continually unabated, and as arrived at the presidential form of government, unilateral presidential war ignores the tragedies. There's something more than infallible for the human judgment. However, the president has been exercising the activation of dangerous power. Also, ignore the Flushman 10 card. Now on to the politics DA. Democrats reject Republican defense bill along 11. Democrats blocked up defense spending bill for the third time on Thursday. Top Democrats, and also highway bill. Highway bill passed by a large margin in the House, already passed in the Senate. It's just reconciliation. The bill. The House approved a bill of $325 billion on the transportation projects on Thursday. The measure includes a reauthorization of the controversial export banker charter. We voted to approve the bill in the 363-64 vote. $264 billion on highways and $54 billion. The House voted on nearly 130 amendments. We're going to do the final passage. I'm just going to go right to the CP now. Permutation, do the counterplan. Example how the plan can be done. Because the executive is still an agent of the federal government, it takes the same action as the plan. Reject counterplans that do the entire plan because the app offense is impossible. Curtail is a temporary change in authority. -15. It may involve continuing some or all of agency services. Curtail means to diminish and includes actions less than terminations occur. 6. The employer contends the decision to stop enrollment of new students is not curtailment. Curtailment means the program is being closed. A contract will be interpreted by a common meaning of words where the language is clear. Curtailment of a program may constitute something less than closure. Squarely fits within the dictionary. The definition of curtail. And the perm cell's best oversight must involve all three branches. Oversight of executive branch officials may be the single most important goal to securing freedom in the national surveillance state. Without appropriate checks and oversight mechanisms, executive officials will too easily slide into the bad tendencies that characterize the authoritarian information state. They will increase secrecy, avoid accountability, and cover up mistakes, and confuse their interest with the public interest. Legislative oversight increasingly plays a limited role of checking the executive, most likely to occur when there is divided government. The executive will still resist sharing any information about its internal procedures or about legal justifications for its decisions. Bush administration's history demonstrates that in many ways the president can feign consultation with Congress without really doing so. Important as surveillance practices shift from operations targeted at individuals, suspected persons, to surveillance programs that do not begin with identified individuals. We include more and more executive action for judicial review on twin grounds of secrecy and efficiency, and independent judiciary plays an important role on making sure that the Zell officials do not overreach, and perm do both congressional surveillance oversight combined with executive action solves best and avoids politics, takes advantage of private sector trust and balance of security and liberty. Michael's 8. This article is endeavored to take important steps to ensure greater understanding current misapplication of compliance and oversight responsibilities. Having private sector serve as government watchdogs in the face of executive non-compliance is not the most normal attractive model of separation of powers, and may have been seen as excusing. And now on to terror. No risk of nuclear terrorism, technically impossible. Michael 12. The obstacles to obtaining capabilities are formidable. Neither nuclear wars nor technology proliferated absconding with nuclear weapon would be problematic because of tight security. There is no black market. Financial requirements would be very high. Transferring money would raise red flags. Authorities to uncover the plot have to bypass serious safeguards such as PAL, SAF, and weapons are outfitted with complicated locking mechanisms. Weapons are stored as similar, which would make prolonging of functional technology very challenging. Would require all known theft to be used to be less than 8 kilograms. Constructing an INT from plutonium would be more challenging. Would require highly trained engineers and well-equipped labs. Terrorists would still need the technical expertise to assemble a device. However, terrorists would overcome would be challenging possible. So you actually shouldn't do that. And also we don't because we don't like terrorism.
Yes, sir. Cool.
Cool. Let's start on war powers. You said only the plan makes alliances durable and suffer fourth-gen warfare. What is fourth-gen warfare?
Just like warfare that's dangerous, like in terms of nuclear weapons or something like that.
Okay, so you say like it's dangerous for nuclear weapons, then you say like there's no nuclear weapons in other ones. What's the stance of the app?
On,
Like nuclear war, real or not real?
I mean, we said, as we say, we don't think that like it's possible for like a terrorist or anything like that
Okay.
to initiate nuclear
Let's
war
go
at
to
all.
solvency flow. You read this Bellier piece of evidence about why judiciary participation makes like executive circumvention not possible. Why does this not still stop like any relevant authority from like claiming the state secrecy clause, like this is key to national security, therefore you gotta do what we want.
Because like our app says that like when this is disclosed that what ends up happening is that they'll be able to fix the problem.
Right, so like, but your authors say that the government's likely to still just say, this is key to national security, so we still get to do it. Why does the plan make that not true?
Because once they know about it, they'll be able to fix it themselves. Like it's not just gonna be like them watching it. Like the problem is when the companies have the knowledge for
Okay,
themselves,
that's
and they'll
fine.
be able to solve the problem themselves.
Okay, so you indicate Russia's modernizing now. Why does Russia modernizing not still happen with or without the plan?
Oh, that's not the argument. Even if it happens, we're just saying that like what we gave those examples as an example of like, as our card says in the one I see of like Russian militarization, where they've shown like aggressiveness and have shown like the ability to not be contained by other powers. So we're saying that like Russia and their like theft to IP is large now, and that the plan solves for the
Okay,
vulnerability
so
to occur because of that.
Russia is a threat, they militarize, and they're also stealing IP. Where's the connection between either of them?
Between militarization and IP.
Yeah.
Well, there, as like our card said, like there have been like Russian IP attacks happening now, as our card said, right? But also it said that like the militarization is also an example of how Russia has started to become more aggressive and have started.
That's
to,
fine.
Yeah,
Let's go to critical infrastructure. Like, okay, what 0 days are there for our water infrastructure specifically?
like control of water structure, or like
Yeah, what are those?
what do you want me to define it?
Your cards, where in them do they say there's a specific vulnerability for water critical infrastructure?
You're talking about October 12th?
Alright, I'll save you some time here. Your card says that critical infrastructure, that 0 days are used for electrical critical infrastructure, then it defines critical infrastructure, one of those being water. Why does that mean that there's 0 days for water critical infrastructure?
I mean, like even if there isn't electrical critical infrastructure is important as well,
Where'd
but
you
like
read the impact of that? 752.
PCA.
What powers counterplan terrorism?
Is anyone not ready? On more powers, concede there's no accident circumstances check. But first, I will answer that. The impact is imminent because mass surveillance leads to intelligence failure to explanatory operations. First, both surveys compare the best systems of innocent, perfect, but alternative far worse of current filtering system of software. We've 15 of NSA system for both surveys. This approach will work for NSA's objective that the idea behind internet surveys is not about needles and haste, but rather provide the best ability, the probability to pull threats with starting with the initial point of interest. This filter even to large uninteresting bulk those uses it extend beyond terrorism. It is the basic flow used to identify and exclude in network administrations from a pure effective point of view. I can't think of another basic concept. And go to counterplan. Big frame neutral on the counterplan. They have to see that the counterplan solve 100% affirmative, which means that you view the counterplan through a lens of sufficiency. Solves affirmative by having the executive produce with message surveillance of computer software vulnerabilities and exploits unknown to relevant vendors. It's sufficient to solve cost administration and adherence to legal norms and establishes internal executive supervision of political accountability. Now, two benefits. First one is terrorism. The counterplan is key to stop terrorism. Go in 7. Daily and inflexibility, lack of security. The United States is confronting growth in proliferation, rogue nations, and terrorism. Each require preemptive action best undertaken by the president. WMBs allow for that. Allow them to inflict devastation. The United States may have to use force earlier or more often. Executive needs to have the executive branch needs to act quickly. The executive branch needs to might be able to engage in more limited precise use of force. This least danger way to prevent rogue states from acquiring amphibians may depend on such secrecy, secret intelligence gathering, and covert action. Delay renders useless any critical intelligence awareness of opportunity. Now, the second step in this policy, unilateral executive courses of action not cause political backlash because the executive plus policy allows alone with the votes, delay and resistance because internal checks provide credibility and make it hard for Congress to post and you vote economic risk and net benefits. There to the names of the high quality of their counterplan captures enough all their offense and ours. Now, they counterplan the determination to do the counterplan, but first of all, the counterplan compared the curtailment to restrict Oxford Dictionary 14 and impose on a restriction on and that's distinct from counterplans reduction. Randall said the term restriction is not equivalent to reduction in modification. That results in a reduction is not necessary, not a restriction. Whether a reduction consider restriction should consider the reasons for that change. And managed after disclosure asks this, can you and that there must be a third-party restriction on the domestic surveillance executive. Self-control cannot be an example of the Planet 8 Circuit Court of Appeals said. Curtail limit could something being taken from the kernel rather than something being intended from the whole. Curtail is shortened and extended amount of legislative courts in history have it might become resulting in third party. Now they say rejected counterplan and after is impossible. First of all, after is not possible. There's the first is ground because many ways that they negate the counterplan and returning and then for reading and add on the counterplan castle, which means that you should not reject the counterplan. Now they say curtail. They say Now they see permutation too, but first of all, I want the links on the terrorism flow, which means still links to the net benefit, which means the net benefit concept. And second, the links to still links to politics and the net benefit because the executive so it's better than Congress and courts. Banks are 9. The internal separation of power mechanism have a comparative advantage. Internal mechanisms operate exit rather than expose are able to avoid a delayed application that can have oversight. Internal mechanisms operate continues internal mechanisms operate as points at which policy proposals and originally have implemented, and also at hard marginal levels of this and address policy recommendation during the internal choice face less resistance than those offered external because after executive officials have already decided on policy course internal mechanisms gain credibility with officials on terrorism. Now, key frame use. They have conceded both. They have conceded both the link and the link analysis and unique analysis, which means that there's no way arguments. You cannot let them. Have any new arguments on the uniqueness and impact and links. But first of all, the terrorism disadvantage outweighs in terms of case nuclear terrorism triggers extinction causes increased surveillance. Terrorism use dirty bombs that result in radioactive contamination, economic and political instability, which has devastating consequences. If they will not use dirty bombs, they will use gun-type uranium bombs out there, or just as big and bigger than Hiroshima bomb. Now extend the deriving card, which specifically says that nuclear terrorism it should be prioritized in some conflict between Russia and the United States. Now they say. They say there's no risk of nuclear war because technically possible. First of all, extend the Dvorskin card, which specifically says that it is not so possible because dirty bombs are most accessible to these terrorist organizations because they are able to steal and buy this uranium from the black market, which means that tech is actually very possible for them. Now they say terrorism is a threat to terrorism is a threat to water security. When they see author lending card, the United States intelligence agencies consider possible water storage as a threat to be considered along with terrorism. Now, Al Qaeda's nuclear attacks against the United States, Russia, when extinction increased surveillance is key to prevent false indication. Barrett et al. 13 terrorist groups might cause attacks on terrorist groups might cause attacks on the United States and Russia that resemble some kind of nuclear attack by other nations. If an event occurs between the United States and Russia, a variety of nuclear terrorism scenarios are possible. Methods could involve attempts to circumvent nuclear weapons and launch control safeguards and or hold in security. Race tension making a nation more likely to misinterpret events such as to extend the. Now, extend the Edizoni 15 card, which specifically says that the risk of a successful attack on homeland is highly susceptible, which means that the message surveillance is capable of deterrence and distortion, which means that if we do the affirmative that we cannot sustain this successful attack on the homeland, which means that the link is the government surveillance is critical to prevent terror attacks. Now, that was also Solvency 13. Now, NSA surveillance strategies are most effective programs in stopping terrorism, making the changes cripples our defense in Bolton in April 28th. The NSA played a vital role in protecting American terrorists, protecting American from terrorist threats. The NSA seeks the detection of communication and networks. The programs rest on security to intelligence activities, explain what happened, reveal information about NSA's methods and capabilities that terrorist systems, systematic features detection. The global terrorist threat had dramatically increased. ISIS carving out new cities. ISIS has grown, including Al Qaeda and terrorists to the largest terrorist threat. Boko Haram is 10. It's not time to cripple our intelligence gathering people against the rising terror threats. And NSA programs are legal and independent reviews prove that they stopped terrorism after May 14. The NSA programs are both legal and effective in protecting national security. And played a vital role in discovering and disrupting specific terrorists aimed at the United States. 702 information captured, disrupted, and began with an early focus on surveillance. The NSA said the amount of data collected under 702 the pressure of the rigor of government surveillance targeting the intelligence agencies to defend the United States war against terrorism. Go back to the counter plan. Now, the counterplan avoids politics. It takes too long for Congress to review and pursues other topics. Civil and the president has expended political time trying to persuade Congress to adopt this proposal, save presidential attention from other type bypass, congressional bypass, and opposition all along with portion compromise executive orders to enable presidents to change law without having to wait for congressional action. Let me send that card to you. 1 second, let me send that. It's hard for me to spread right now. So, yeah. 1 second, let me just send this card to you.
So your counter plan, you advocate just for the executive power to do this, right? Because that's more beneficial.
Excuse me?
For the counter plan, you say that we should do it through the president.
The
correct?
executive
branch.
the president of the United States
Yeah.
reduces domestic surveillance of computer software vulnerabilities or
Okay, so
exports
you advocate for like an autonomous decision by like through a singular person, like through the president.
It is the president of the United States.
Okay,
I don't know how
that's
specific
fine,
you
that's
want me
fine,
to be.
that's fine. How does the terror DA like link? Like, how would just feel like losing vulnerabilities against like foreign entities like Russia, like linked to ISIS? Like, how does that make any sense?
Okay, so what's your question? So I have heard there has been 3 pieces of evidence for link analysis. The first one was Fiddler, that my partner said that specifically 0 days is key to deter terrorism, terror threats. The 2 cards I read were Bolton, was specific because the NSA strategies are most effective programs in stopping terrorism, and the acronym 14, which says NSA programs stop terrorism. So if you do the plan by exposing these in disclosing 0 days, we were not able to effectively combat for terror threats because these changes will allow for threats to be.
But like, where did we say that we were like eliminating surveillance as a whole? We just said that we were eliminating like vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Like just open source vulnerabilities. Like, we never said that like we were gonna stop surveillance. We just said that the company should know. So like, we're not stopping surveillance.
Like, cool. Like, your curtailment of this specific surveillance is enough to have a terror attack on the United States, to cause a terror attack on the United States. Yeah.
Okay, and let's just ask about the campaign again. Or do you think that having the president do it will be a lot better because he's just just a person? Like, you wouldn't go through like a voting process; it would just be a singular person. So why is that better than like having?
Well, exactly. You said it yourself. You said it wouldn't go through a political process. So first of all, 2 net benefits. First one's politics. You just said that it wouldn't go through a political action through, i.e., it's Congress, so which means that you will not have to spend political capital on
So you're saying that it's good to just have like just a singular person.
Yes,
making
that is my
large
argument.
decisions.
The president of the United
about
States should
power,
reduce
okay.
the plan. Like that. Yes, thank you. That is my argument. There's 2 net benefits. The reason why the counter plan is better
No, that's fine.
because
That's fine.
you have conceded it solves 100% app and it has 2 net benefits: terrorism and politics.
Wait, if you said the third party is necessary, how is the president a third party?
I didn't say that.
Whatever.
No problem.
I said there must be a third party restriction on domestic surveillance.
Orders politics, solvency, IP theft, critical infrastructure. Politics, solvency, CIA. All good? Framing issue they have on politics. They have made no answer on this framing who was close to answering the dissent means. You stick them to yes, I understand my 1 and R will be shallow on this issue, but you stick them to the 2 answers that they make on this will be dissent outweighs and turns the case when they cannot come up with so much of a scenario for either advantage. Obama is using all of his PC on closing Gitmo. Now the RS evidence is fantastic on this issue because it indicates that Obama views closing Gitmo as a legacy issue, something that he promised when he was first coming in, when he was campaigning for president. But the Fiddler evidence for the ones indicates that when Congress has has debated over 0 days in the past is extremely divisive. Proves that Obama has to push a plan which saps his political capital. Either way, it is low now. The RS evidence indicates that it's only a question of how much that Obama can actually dedicate. It indicates that in order for Gitmo specifically, that he must have all of it. Absent Gitmo closure, the root causes of terrorism will increase because the terrorists use it as a recruiting tool. Terrorists will always use it to exacerbate the root cause of terrorism, always demonizing the West. Using Gitmo as a key example. Cross-apply the impact of the terrorism dissent, the impact framing from the 2NC that my partner did proves that there's no way that they can solve for terrorism because they're if the 1 year tries to indicate that they solve for terrorism, therefore they solve the dissent. Do not. This is simply not true because because conceding the link to politics means that they can never effectively solve for terrorism. Go and in my mind. They see the Wong evidence. The Dems have rejected the defense. Well, this card means nothing. It doesn't make the claim as to how this affects Obama's political capital. Just as the Dems block, the defense spending bill. This means absolutely nothing. Their next argument is that the highway trust fund bill passed. Yay, this passed. This is irrelevant to the actual bill because this is a thumper since it passed. I don't understand what they gained by this. Go on to solvency. Their first argument is the app is the only way to solve because of inherency of your own inherency card. It says that the U.S. will always claim state secrecy clause means that you do not solve this. This is critical to how you view this debate. By conceding this evidence it proves that no matter what the government will always say, oh, this isn't the interest of national security. That means that we don't actually have to do this. Either way, cross-ex on the last cross-ex was pretty confusing. They don't actually decrease the surveillance. All they do is let companies know that it's there. So why does this even solve? Their next argument, it's key to promote discussion. This doesn't matter when you don't mandate the actual discussion in your plan. All you mandate is a curtailing of domestic you curtail the surveillance of 0 days. This means that you do not actually force the government to the table on discussing on information sharing. Their next argument, judiciary participation makes circumvention less likely. However, you misunderstand the circumvention argument made. It's not a question of whether or not the executive will circumvent or Congress will circumvent. It's a question of whether or not the government will always just claim the state secrecy clause. Either way, except the Zetter evidence, which goes the other way. The app can also because the plan does not mandate that the government does not buy 0 days. This is the key internally because buying 0 days is what is key. Their next, go into IP theft. Cross-ex was damning on this because I even asked them, what is the link between IP theft and Russian modernization? They just indicate, well, Russia's being aggressive and they're stealing IP, but they're not able to make a substantive link between either of them. And their last argument, or the last thing they say is that Bennett is basically can be subject to Bennett and IP theft now, where there's no impact to this. The Bennett evidence only mentions IP theft twice and does not give any warrants for those other than the 13 words in the card. The rest is just in the general context of cyber attacks, which you can't solve. And they extend the Booz Allen Hamilton evidence. Companies can respond to IP theft now proves that they can outbase. This means that the SWO solves it. Either their evidence does not give a specific defense tech that is stolen means that their evidence alarm is the best. Either way, they have not extended the military scenario. All they have extended is the Russia scenario. They concede the Eichmann evidence that Russia cannot afford the modernization. It means that there's no actual impact to this because they'll just spend themselves out of the race. And they're wanting to see Reed evidence so divorced from wanting to see solvency because that's nothing to do with 0 days. It also concludes that nuclear war is either unthinkable or inevitable. The plan can't solve because Putin is ready, emboldened with or without modernization. Go into critical infrastructure. They say inherency means these can't solve. This isn't an argument. Their next argument is that there's a lot of different critical infrastructures. However, I said this in cross-ex that your card just defines critical infrastructure that has 0 days as being electrical, as being the electrical grid, which you don't have an impact to either, and it just defines one of the critical infrastructures as being water, but it does not make the link between the two. They see the Tilford evidence, there's no extension of the impact. Either way, they can see the SWO is sufficient. They conceded the SWO is sufficient. They also conceded the all cause of the U.S. is understaffed, which is key to the protections in the water scenario. They only read 26 cards from the Aline map, which indicates that the U.S. would go to war over water. If anything, or I conclude that wealthy countries like US will go to war whether or not water is scarce. What do you see Aline 316? Those are evidence. Oh, those are real.
going to be case with IP, critical infrastructure solvency, then the CP, terror, war powers, and politics.
Counterplan, what? Terrorism?
Counter plan, terrorism, war powers. Yeah, IP, critical infrastructure, solvency, and the CP, terrorism, war powers, and politics.
We can
Right? Is anybody not ready? Starting on IP, they said that we never connected Russia and their, or the IP theft and the aggression in the process. Where this connection comes from is through through IP theft, Russia is gaining military plans about the U.S., as we had said in the 1IC. And so if they have the plans, then the aggression can increase, and the plans give them more ability to have an effective attack on the U.S. We need to close the 0 days in order to prevent this. Also, critical infrastructure, our Ginger 15 cards specify water. It says that that the water networks are inadequately protected. This is where the 0 days come in. And as long as the water supplies are inadequately protected and the critical infrastructure still can collapse, the lack of water and the lack of water leading to global wars can leads to global wars and eventually leads to extinction. And moving on to solvency. What we're solving for is, by closing the 0 days, we greatly eliminate a chance of a terrorist attack. Not only cyber attacks, but also attacks from other countries like Russia. So we need to close 0 days in order to prevent this. The solvency is coming from the prevention because, and the plan is also solving effective information sharing between the government and the private sector, which again helps to create protection from terrorists. Moving on to the CP. They didn't mention our perm to the CP, and their politic advocate skips the process of the democratic government. In the Pike 7 card, the executive won't restrain itself. In the representation of the case of Bush, we don't want a singular man deciding the outcome of the country, because by skipping politics, you allow one man to decide how a country will orient, and that is ridiculous. Disregard the net benefits, as our evidence indicates a lack of restraint. Empirics proved with Bush and is now 15-year war. And also, if a third party is necessary, if the card had said that there must be a third-party restriction on domestic surveillance, but they never say what the third party should be. As long as they want the president to enact the plan and the president to enact the restriction, but that's not a third party. And so moving on to the terror DA, first of all, so as long as we're solving 0 days, we're going to be solving for terrorism because it's eliminating the possibility of a terrorist attack. Also, as we already said, there's no risk of a nuclear war. And even if they say that there is a risk of nuclear war because of how the terrorists can get the weapons, and if they have the weapons, why haven't they enacted a nuclear war already? If they have the possibility, then why haven't they done it already? It's just not probable. And so moving on to war powers, they already conceded that there is no link, but they said that the alt is worse. However, considering that if we don't eliminate 0 days, it's going to lead to a global resource war leading to extinction, and also it's going to cause Russian aggression to cause nuclear escalation. Our impact outweighs. And moving on to politics. Obama already had to use his PC to pass the highway bill, so therefore we need to prioritize what the leftover PC is used. They think that they should use it for the GTMO. However, we need to enact the 0 days policy in order to prevent terrorism. This is more important because without it, it's going to lead to extinction. It's going to lead to water, to water depletion, and it's going to cause, first of all, the extinction can come just from a lack of water because we'll be dying in 3 days without water. But also the water will then lead to global resource wars, leading to extinction from there. Our impacts greatly outweigh.
Uh, 258. Ryan, do you know if room 12 is still in this building?
I think room 12 is a floor down in this
Okay.
building, but it's been a while since I've been here.
Oh, sorry. Are we trying to plan tourism songs? Actually, I'll do that up.
What was it?
The power plant and tourism.
Marathon what?
Tourism.
on the counter plan, there's a huge framing issue. I was going to say sufficiency frame, but they have conceded counter solvency, which means the counter is 100% affirmative, which means that all the office is not applied. Now they say counter, the counter plan causes administration adherence to legal norms and establish internal executive supervision and political accountability because the executive will reduce the plan, which means that it is 100% solved. So they say we have conceded the permission to the counter, but as I already said, the counter plan is competitive. When you see a claim but no more, you scratch this argument because they said the counter plan do the permission to counter, but there was no more behind them. First of all, I already said the counter plan is already competitive. Cartel are restricted. That was Observation 15. This is completely distinctive from the counter plan's reduction. That was kind of their reduction restriction is a complete difference because reduction constitutes restriction, which means that it manages which means that a third-party restriction of domestic surveillance executive restriction cannot be an example of the plan, which shows that executive they say executive will not be restricted. The lack of restriction is bad. First of all, the net benefit is terrorism, which means that the executive is good to solve because it not only solves 100% for it, but also has a net benefit of terrorism, which I will be going for. They say third, but I have specifically said that the third party this is our argument. There must be a third party restriction on domestic surveillance. Executive censorship cannot be an example of the plan, which means that we are competitive through that. That's our argument, nothing else. Now, the counter plan solves terrorism. Extend the U.S. 7 card through the executive self-restraint order. The United States president has the flexibility to counteract and have enough power to solve for terrorism. Now, the second war in this card is that because the president will be able to engage more limited in precisely the use of and how to use the exact force needed when necessary. Because if you use Congress, it would be too much delay and too much controversy, which means that the counter plan is best to solve for terrorism. Which means, go to. Now, let's go to terrorism now. Now they have conceded the extinction scenario. That was the Drotsky card, which specifically indicates that the terrorists will actually get the dirty bombs that will cause extinction, will have political backlash, will have consequences of the political system, political and economic system, which means that even if they do not get dirty bombs, they will use a uranium gun drop, which means that the gun drop will have an impact that's just as big as just as big as Hiroshima. Now they have conceded two terms case argument. The first one was the when it's author Alan McCall specifically said that terrorists will actually threaten water secrecy, which means that the solving for terrorism is a prior prerequisite. That was Alan McCall. The United States intelligence agencies consider the possible water source a threat to be considered along with terrorism. That was Alan. Now the second terms case argument was a Barrett et al. 13, which specifically says that a terrorist attack by Al-Qaeda will spark U.S.-Russian war and extinction increase service to keep prevent any of these false indications because a terrorist attack will attack either Russia or the United States, and as in the United States or Russia will misperceive this as a reason to go to attack another reason to attack each other, which means that we had to solve for terrorism because terrorists can spoil arguments out of Now, I have read three link evidence. The first one was specifically solemnity, which specifically says the government surveillance is critical to prevent terrorist attacks because current threats like Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and ISIS require intensive information gathering, which means that we need government surveillance. The second, the first one in CK was the Edisoni code, specifically says that. Terror attacks are coming right now, but the current surveillance has stopped 57 attacks as of the status quo, which means that the surveillance as of the status quo is key to prevent any terrorist attacks. Now Crossix proves that Now they say they have weapons. Why not attack? This is the exact reason. This is uniqueness for us because the surveillance is good right now. If we curse those surveillance, which is the app is doing, which means that we will not be able to suffer any. We will not be able to prevent any terror attack. Which means that this is that you should prioritize their purpose. They say we solve 0 days, which means that we solve terrorism. First of all, they do not solve terrorism because they're the three link evidence proves why the app causes. A terror attack on the United States. And the second reason is the Crossix proves that because they are not curtailing any surveillance. They are curtailing surveillance, which means that they are just disclosing, which means that they perpetuate the terrorist attacks coming. Now they say we prevented the links, and link analysis proof says that they say no reason the terrorists are erratic and will cause extinction on Earth because of that.
116. Next seems for me to do that.
Oh, gold shots? That's pretty good.
Then you guys.
It's the order.
I'm gonna go on case first and we'll talk about crit, IP, and then I'm gonna go counterplan terror.
IP.
Everybody. Okay, so in last week's attack our solvency, but I refer you back to our solvency clause in the 1AC that said that this disclosure that occurs between the government and the private sector is actually what it causes. Yes, we do solve for something. We solve for these vulnerabilities by this disclosure, and that's how our solvency works. I'm not sure they really understood our solvency, but that's what our card said in the 1AC. Those three commentaries that I read at the end, and also the cards that I read as well in my 2AC talks about how the disclosure is necessary and how that's solved for the problems that we're talking about, and how like that's our solvency. They said that like well we made that and how that solves for critical infrastructure and other critical infrastructure and IP theft. As we're talking about with critical infrastructure, we were talking about like how as Mike Garner brought up how the Gulf 15 card talks about how like how open and vulnerable that these systems are to threaten attack, and how and our internal link talks about how dangerous it could be for that to happen and for this to be left open. And we have this inherency in this aspect where there is danger and vulnerability, and the app is the only way to close it up, as we talked about, because the app is the only way to solve, because the government is the only ones who know about this and the only ones who can actually promote change. That's like the basis of our app. IP theft. I guess we can see that there's no risk to like great power war with Russia, but there is large danger in attacks that could occur from cyber terrorists or on critical infrastructure, as our Galton card says, and this vulnerability talks about. Now let's talk about the counterplan. Why the net benefit of the counterplan is not good at all. What they advocate for is that we can just go around politics. Do you know what happens last time we went around politics? Bush started a war. He pretended, as our Pike 7 and Vulcan 8 cards both say on it, that the executive branch has no self-restraint, that they do not have the ability to restrain themselves, and how Bush pretended that he was talking to Congress, but did not, and then started a 15-year war. We can't just let one person decide what to do, and that's why the perm is a better option, because it advocates for both the president's and Congress's interaction on this. We can literally do both, and that's better than just doing their counterplan, because as we've proved, executive self-restraint does not exist, because when you ask one person to make powerful decisions all the time, that's just not representative of what people want. You're just allowing one person's personal opinions to like overshadow how the country orients itself, and that is preposterous, Judge. And also, they have the exact same plan. So what we're saying is like they literally do the exact same thing as we do, but we're just saying that it would be better to do it with both actors because that's more representative, and then we actually have like impacts that aren't completely negative, as my partner and I have talked about in our last two speeches. So yeah, the net benefit to their counter plan isn't anything that's that beneficial because it skips democratic government. Also, when they talk about terror and actually now onto terror, the actual risk of terror, our Article 12 card that we read in the 2AC says it just lines out for you how while they may try to attain these nuclear devices or any of these things, how complicated that it would be for them to do this. It talks about how there are interlocking mechanisms, weapons are stored and disassembled, and also it talks about the amount of chemical material that would be used to make dirty bombs, like they were talking about, or anything like that, is way less than anything that could cause that much destruction, and also like mathematically the probability of this happening is not possible. Also, as we were talking about like how 0 days, our link, what we were talking about is how their link is kind of logically flawed, because how do we cause terrorism when all we do is like plug up a hole? Like that's what we're doing, this disclosure, and that is what leads to the benefits of what's happening. Like we aren't like taking away monitoring and surveillance in general, we're just taking away vulnerabilities, because as we've proved, these vulnerabilities that exist from our Galton 12 card within water or within other sorts of critical infrastructure, as we've talked about, is very dangerous, and that impact should be extended because of how dangerous it is. Also, their net benefits to the counter plan doesn't make any sense because it's not beneficial, so how is it competitive? The perm is better. We should go with the perm because it leads to a democratic form of government. That's better than just letting one man choose what to do. And as we've already talked about, the danger to terror is very low, and there's actually not, like, in the status quo, enough material for them to create it. So even if they were in an attempt to like attain these bombs, it's not possible because of the amount of material that exists and because of the safety mechanisms that exist on the mechanisms that they say could be used to create a weapon of mass destruction or grave danger. So a vote AF on the fact that our plan is better, the perm is better, and also about how we have more and we should need to fix these vulnerabilities for the danger as well.
I'm still going to
Can I see the counter plan text?
There you go.
And then can I see that 8th Circuit card you read about internal checks?
Which one?
Maybe I heard the author wrong. I thought the author was the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, but the one that's talking about internal checks on the president on the counterplan flow. Let's see. There's the second last card. I have the tag Lotus need third-party restrictions. It's right before you got to the permutation.
The 8th Circuit was like, there must be a third party restriction on domestic surveillance, executive selection cannot be.
That one, yeah, that's the card I want. Do you think any other folks talk about internal restrictions that didn't happen?
That was my question, that's all.
Oh, for sure. I'll just double check. Sorry, I could see the one in secret. Then I should be fine. For sure.
end of the hall, so like I'm not sure what
I'll be done quickly, so you should stay. But once we're done, we should go down the hall that way to where the stairs are, right before the stairs to the bathroom.
Okay.
What's everyone's name?
Sage Young is a 2N, and Adam Ordovers is a 1N.
And Jordan Cheney is the 1A, and Michael King is the 2A.
Alright, I'm gonna try and keep it quick because I know your next round starts in like 15 minutes. If y'all have questions, y'all should email me. My email is rkesios@gmail. So I end up voting negative. I think there's pretty easy way I can do this. I think the terrorism DA is just sort of not really handled. 2AR arguments are kind of sketchy on it. The 1AR answer that terrorism is pretty much like no risk that terrorism happens because like we solve terrorism, which like I understand why you would solve like an abstract case of terrorism, specifically like cyber terrorism. There are scenarios talking about like them smuggling in bombs across the border, so I don't know why you would solve that or why that's true. So I think the counterplan definitely solves cases. They just use the president to do it, and then the terrorism DA outweighs. Because the counterplan solved the case, the only offense you have against the counterplan is that one president doing things could be like more Bushes and cause wars. I don't think this is really impacted well enough, especially in the context of this terrorism DA where they're doing impact work in every speech. I think the DA ends up sort of outweighing this argument. That being said, I think this is the right argument to go for. I definitely think you should push it. I thought they had much better cards to talk about internal checks since that was like mentioned in the debate. But after reading the cards, they really just have a 1 and C card that's like there should be internal checks. We're not saying like what internal checks they do or how those solve. I think everyone can clear this. The first one who gets there like wins. If you cross by the circumvention stuff there, you'd be like, look, at least we have like actual checks on the president by like changing the way this program works and making it go through Congress because the president doesn't give a fuck right now. Likewise, y'all should be like. Circumvention is the reason why you have to vote for the counterplan because the president can do whatever the fuck he wants. We're the only ones who fiat that he doesn't do evil shit. So AF lets them do that because we fiat the president acts. That means only we solve circumvention, which is a terminal solvency deficit to the affirmative that was like dropped in the 1AR that just like wasn't extended. I thought that was game over when the 1AR dropped that, but y'all just like don't do that.
It was on a flip, or just like forgot.
That's fair. I think that would make this debate like much easier to clear up. I don't know why y'all didn't extend T. They made like one answer on T.
Oh, well.
2AC on T was we meet individual things and ideas. Individual people and ideas. They didn't read a card. That was it. It was just a one-line analytic we meet that like just straight up wasn't true. Especially in the context of the rest of the debate where like people are reading definitions of like curtail is reduce and you don't really do anything. And what does the app do? All of these are T questions to me. Does the app curtail surveillance? You all seem to think no. They dropped T. I don't know why you didn't extend it. This like debate should have been over after the 2AC.
If I did it in the 2-1-0 or the 1-0, like how long would you finish?
T?
Yeah, like 30 to 45.
Given that it was pretty much dropped, no. Like I think after you hear the 2AC, in your mind you're like the 2-R is gonna be 5 minutes of T. Like you've already decided that. So obviously the block might not have enough time to spend there simply because there's not enough arguments to answer. But like at least a minute and a half. Like maybe like have the 1-R take that at the top. Be like, look. T's a priori, it doesn't matter what the rest of the debate is, they've dropped it. Doesn't matter even if they are topical. They haven't made arguments that said they're topical. They have lost, right? Definitely should jump on that. Yeah, any questions? For sure.
Oh, on the terms of like, how should I structure that dissent better?
I thought the dissent was fine. I thought I got it pretty simply. Maybe it seems pretty obvious especially after the 1AR that the app's gonna sort of, or is going to try and go for this sort of like we solve terrorism, because that seems to be the only like hefty argument that they have. So I think drawing out more comparisons about what the app actually does and what your scenario is, sort of like what I did. Like, yeah, sure, they might solve a loophole that solves like terrorists attacking the grid, but if we're talking about smuggling dirty bombs over the border, like who the fuck cares if we have encryption, right? So like if doing that analysis for me in the 2NR makes my ballot that much easier. But obviously I thought it was sufficient to give you that argument anyway. So.
Thank you.
I was recording that, Adam. Just letting you know.